Hello everyone, I hope you're all well and enjoyed the windy weekend. Obviously last week we did the long collage. I'm sorry about that, I think it slightly frustrated some of you, but I think the results are amazing. But as I said in the email, I'd like to do something a bit different and try and, as ever, sort of alternate week to week the type of thing we do so we don't get stuck in one area. Last week was kind of quite loose and expressive, and this time I want to start a bit tighter and just start with a bit more explanation. And I'm working on something which I've worked with other people before, and it's just about using basic shapes and looking into the detail a bit more. But then as we develop into the exercise over the morning, you'll see that although we start quite tight, we end up quite loose and hopefully with a bit of colour. The rest of this video will probably be over the shoulder shots and little demos and things like that. And also I was going to say that what I'm going to try and do is I'm only going to post to one video, but I want you to probably pause it, or you can probably watch it in one hit if you like, but then pause it at certain times, and I'll try and coordinate the lessons so it kind of hits those pauses. I think that makes sense. Right. I'll talk to you. Well, hopefully you'll come over here, and I'll go from there. Right, I've attached in the email also this little lesson plan I did. I'm not just going to reproduce this because some people might have already done it, but if you want to read it, it will essentially lay out what we're going to do. But I want to now do it again, but with something else, which would be more, which would be part of the lesson. So if you've now read this sort of lesson plan, then you will kind of get a gist of what we're going to do. But we're not going to reproduce that exact thing because, as I say, some of you might have already done it. But we're going to start by looking at this leaf, which is a part of a Swiss chard, and we'll progress with other images. I will post this email so you can look at this, but obviously I've got a print of it. We're going to try and draw this, but in the same technique that I've done in the explanation sheet. So first of all, with this object, I want you to look at it and look at it for a little while and kind of absorb what it's about. But once you have then looked at it, we're going to draw move that back. You're going to draw the basic outline of this leaf. Okay, so this is what we're going to call the general outline. All right, so going to be loose. Kind of drawing like that. So I'm using a 4B, fairly loose, not particularly worried about the line quality, but we're just trying to get the overall form. So this is stage 2, and this is looking this time at the internal shapes. Now, what we're going to do now, you can either do kind of loose internal shapes, like a sort of that kind of line work. So there's almost 3, I can see almost 3 areas, just to quickly lay it out. And then we're going to I'm going to just work at one area, then I'll stop and do the rest off camera, because otherwise it'll be boring for you. But we're going to look in this one area. So up here, I'm going to draw the first shapes I can see, and not too accurately. And these are shapes which are defined by the tone, the reflection, and so on. Okay, so there I think the 1, 2, 3 probably the first shapes, and we draw each one sort of more or less to completion. Okay, and we can slightly correct if we want. All right. Now I think this is a reasonable representation of the interior shapes of this object. Okay, it's not perfect, but it's just a general idea of where they are. Now we're going to do the secondary objects. These again are made up by shadows and the highlights. So again, if we look at the top, just looking at this area, here's a light patch there. That's one shape. There's a patch there, which is slightly darker, but I'm not shading these, and so on. And there. So again, we're looking at the shapes made up by the reflections and the color change tones of the object as they are. I mean, it'll be slightly different for all of you because you'll see things slightly differently, and that's the reason we're all artists. Okay, so I'll stop the camera now, but I'll carry on drawing these other shapes in. Right, what you've ended up is a sort of strange, kind of slightly abstract shape. And don't forget, we're looking at one odd leaf, slightly out of context, in a load of leaves. So it does look, you know, it's odd, and also it's just black and white and there's no shading. Now, the reason I chose a leaf is because it makes you look harder at the slightly abstract shapes. Whereas when we use the poppy, which you can try as well, it's more obvious what the poppy is. And when you go through the stages, you end up with a sort of something that looks hopefully like a poppy. But so we're trying to deliberately, we're choosing something which stretches us slightly and makes us sort of look identified just at the shapes. Now the next stage is what I call where we identify the character or identify the detail. So now we're going to look at the object again and try and pick out little quirky things, like here you can see where there's kind of a leaf kind of cuts back, and you start to notice that although we've done a loose outline, it's kind of, you know, there's quite a lot of sort of little sharp bits and brown bits, and these are kind of what I think give the object, in this case a shard leaf, its identity. So I will continue to draw around this, and there's another one here. It's like nice little rip. So we're looking at those kind of shapes there. My dog's barking, so I'm just going to carry on off video, and I'll come back to this in a minute. So now I think you've gone round and you've looked back in the details and identified the characteristics of this object. To me, it's a sort of slight shape of the leaf, you know, those curly bits there and so on. Now, what I want to do now is the last bit, which I think is where we sort of start to look less at the object and more at our copy or version. And we start to sort of do this kind of loose, sort of sketchy, continuous line, almost dot the dots. So we go around the object and we give it some sort of form. So we're tracing the objects with all the shapes we've done, and we're sort of looking at them and sort of tying them together. And the idea is this is where we speed up. We're now a much looser pencil. And you sort of get carried away, and you sort of pick out like that little spiral, and you know, it kind of goes back and forth, and again. And the idea is you're adding your kind of artistic license into the form. Because it's an organic form, it's a plant, it's nice and sort of round and loose. You want to get away from the hard edges. And this is where the continuous line sort of drawing technique kind of lends itself, and you can go around it in sort of tie-in bits and so on. Okay, and again, it's nice and abstract, but I think you'll find now it sort of becomes, yeah, we can start to sort of emphasize, if you sort of go over the main kind of veins of the leaves and things, it starts to pull it back and sort of really starts to identify it as kind of what it is. But the main thing is we're trying to add appeal, an aesthetic appeal to this. So you can see I'm just kind of rambling on a bit because I want you to see the technique of just going around and loosely defining or picking out the edges and making them looser. Okay, so as I say, sort of more of a continuous line type drawing. Now I'm going way too quick, but I'm just trying to do this quickly. Okay, so then finally around the whole thing. That's as far as I wanted to go with that thing. But that's my drawing of this based on the technique where we break it down, we look, we do the general outline softly, then we go for the primary shapes, then the secondary shapes, then we identify the detail, and then we look and we give it an aesthetic appeal. So this is the process that I want to work on today, and I want you to work on, but we're not just going to draw a leaf, we're going to do other things. So I'm going to continue to post images, and we'll just work on bits of them, but then as we go on over the morning and into what you might think of as homework, then we can take one of these drawings, and then what we'd like to do is then start adding colour and make it some sort of abstract, sort of not abstract but sort of loose kind of stylistic drawing with a bit of colour of the objects we're looking at. So I think that's as much as I can do as an explanation, but the rest of it will be done online, so to speak, or virtually, or via WhatsApp, and hopefully we'll produce some interesting results. I'll talk to you in a bit.